All right, so in section 11.6, we're going to look at something called conditional probability. So probabilities where we focus on just one group of objects are called conditional probabilities. Right. Our notation, we put a vertical line in there, and that vertical line we're going to read as given that. So the probability of A given B means to find the probability that event A occurs, but to restrict our consideration to those outcomes of A that occur within B. So the probability of A occurring given that event B has already occurred. Conditional probabilities can be phrased in different ways. We can see the word or term phrase given that. So that's definitely one thing that we do want to watch out for. Right? So given that is definitely something that we want to be on the lookout for. There's going to be slightly different ways that they can be phrased if we're just focusing on one group of people. So that a randomly selected event B is also a randomly selected event A. And what this means is if we kind of think about what we saw in the previous section, we were looking at and probabilities. When we were looking at and probabilities, we were looking at our whole Venn diagram. Right? So looking at this, the probability that a person is college educated and is married is this probability in the middle, but we're looking at our whole Venn diagram. That's different from the probability that a college educated person is married, because then we're looking at a person that is married given that they have a college education. So we've restricted our group. Instead of looking at our entire diagram, we're just looking at one little portion of our Venn diagram. So the first example that we're going to do, we're just going to be looking at the phrasing of some questions and try to decide if these are examples of conditional probabilities or and probabilities. All right, so to decide if the events in the question are used in a conditional probability or in an and probability problem. Explain. And then we're going to write the statement using probability notation. All right, so the probability that a randomly selected teenager will go online sometime during this month. All right, so if we're looking at kind of the different groups that we have in this problem, we're looking at a randomly selected person, and then our groups, set A, or group A, event A, that's if the person goes online. Group B is the event that the person is a randomly selected teenager. So in this particular problem, we are starting with a randomly selected teenager. So we are focusing on one of our groups. So this would be an example of a conditional probability. Right? We are given that the person is a teenager. Notation-wise, probability that a person goes online given that they are a teenager is the probability of A given B. Right, for example B, the probability that a randomly, that should be the word selected in there, randomly selected person is a teenager who will go online. In this case, we are looking at a random person. We are starting with our whole pool of people, not just one small group. So this is going to be the case of an and probability. We begin with a random person. All right, so since we're beginning with a random person and it's an and, this would be a case of A and B. All right, we'd be looking at our whole Venn diagram and just focusing on the middle. And then example C, the probability that a randomly selected person who goes online this month is a teenager. So we're starting with a randomly selected person who goes online this month. Right? So in this case, this is going to be like A. Another example of a conditional probability because we are given that the person goes online. Right, so notation for this, we are given that the person goes online, so that's event A. So we're looking at the probability of event B given that event A has occurred.